It is no secret that using slow motion is a cinematic resource that a lot of filmmakers have been using more and more frequently with the accessibility of it. But before we get into sort of talking about that resource, let's talk about what cinematic really is. To me, I believe cinematic is enhanced reality. It's essentially using the tools that storytellers have on their toolkit to make an audience feel something more pronounced. It's that punchy color grade, it's that moody lighting, it's that emotional music. And I believe using slow motion uses the exact same methods. It's injecting our visual taste buds with flavors that we just originally couldn't taste. It's capturing those little tiny details of water particles that our eyes can't see. It's enhancing the movement of muscles whenever you watch an action scene. It's seeing the little tiny explosion particles when something blows up. So when using this as a resource, you should keep in mind, what is it enhancing within the scene? If it's not enhancing something, then don't use it. So with all that being said, with all of that information, it's essentially basically saying, if it's not enhancing an emotion or driving something or teaching the audience something that they can't perceive with their eyeballs, then don't use it. Because if you overuse it, you lose its effect. So with that sort of being understood, let's move on to what frame rates you should use in order to enhance a scene. There's obviously the standards, which is 60 frames, 120 frames, and then it goes all the way up to 940 frames per second. Now, while using something like phantom speed is an incredible frame rate that's super epic, first of all, not a lot of us have it accessible to us, and secondly, it's actually too slow. It's so slow that only things that look really cool are like when people get like slapped in the face or stuff is blowing up, but really, you shouldn't be trying to strive towards that frame rate because it takes stuff moving super fast in order for it to actually look like anything when you're filming it. If you're just shooting something at regular speed, like for instance me talking, it's gonna look more like a photograph, like an annoying photograph that's slightly moving but not at the speed you want it to. That segues into another key point when utilizing slow motion is make sure what you're capturing is going fast. If it's anything moving slow, like for example, if you were to shoot a static shot of trees in slow motion, it's going to look more like a photograph than anything interesting. A good little hack that I use is I look at something, and if it's moving fast and it's something that I know my eyes can't perceive at the speed that it's going, I'll shoot it. So for example, I'll shoot water particles. Like if I see like water blowing up out of like between two rocks, I'll capture that in slow motion. If it's animals running or people running or water particles or anything in nature that I cannot capture with my eyeballs, then I'll film that at a slower frame rate. Think of it this way. Cameras, frame rates, and all the tools that a filmmaker has is almost like a magic wand. Whenever you point it at something, you have the ability to enhance it, to make it seem a lot cooler. So if let's say there is water shooting up between two rocks, if you put that into slow motion, all of a sudden you're creating a canvas, an image of which something that people just cannot see or perceive is now being able to be seen. That's why when we watch the little tiny water particles fly when someone's jumping over rocks, and we're like, wow, that's so cool. It's because you're showing something that exists, but adding the magic of it because it's something that we cannot perceive. Another area that I use it quite often is to stretch moments out. So let's say I'm doing like event coverage or even shooting a music video, and I see something that's very emotional, but I know it's quick-lived. I know it's gonna be a short moment. So perhaps it's someone crying or someone giving someone a hug. I'll film that in slow motion because I know that moment will feel a lot better when I have more to work with and the audience has more to draw from. The way I think about it is I watch it afterwards in my head. I know whatever I'm capturing is gonna be double, triple, or 4 times the amount of what I'm actually seeing it in reality. So when I capture something, I go to myself, I think, okay, I could watch this hug last longer than 2 seconds. I could watch it for 5 or 10 seconds because it's that good of a moment. Then I'll shoot it in slow motion. Speaking as an editor and someone who like trims and cuts footage together, having longer moments is always great. So whenever someone comes to me with footage that's like 2 seconds or 3 seconds of good stuff, it's really hard for me to work with that. So I like having at least 5 seconds of footage that I can play around with. And when something is in slow motion, I can slow it out, I can stretch it to make it longer. So as an editor, slow motion is really great. But like what I said before, if I start using those slow motion moments in every single scene, at every single moment, I overuse it, and if I overuse it, I lose its effect in the scene. Another great spot that I use it all the time in is actually to stabilize footage. Let's say you're filming architecture, you've got a real estate job, or perhaps you have to capture detail of, I don't know, products if you don't have a gimbal, or perhaps you even do have a gimbal, if you throw that into 60 frames per second and what you're capturing is static, but you want to add nice movement, utilizing something like slow motion can make that handheld spin around shot feel like a gimbal shot, and that gimbal shot feel like a dolly shot. It takes out all those little awkward bumps and just makes it a lot smoother. It stretches them out. So rather than the bumps being like this at 24 frames, it's kind of more like this at 60. Okay, now let's talk about when you shouldn't use this. When it's like, no go, don't use it, it's not great. What I'm doing right now, talking to camera. There's no point of me doing this at 60 frames per second because I know for a fact I'm never ever going to slow this down. Like, that's just for certain. So understanding what you're capturing and understanding the scene. So talking head stuff, don't need to shoot it in slow motion. Filming speeches, talking, anything with words in it, you probably know that you don't have to slow that down unless you know someone's going to laugh out loud or they're going to do an enhanced emotion like crying or screaming or anger. Anything with enhanced emotion will probably feel really great when it's slowed down. Now, finally, I'm leaving this to the end because it's not something that I want to promote, and it kind of contradicts to some of my earlier statements. But where I use this sometimes is if what I'm filming does not seem interesting whatsoever, there's no fireworks, there's nothing exciting, I'll throw it into slow motion as a last resort to make some sort of coverage more exciting. So my background comes from shooting like event coverage, everything from like weddings to boring corporate parties that people would have. And whenever I knew that a scene just wasn't gonna have anything, there was no paper flying, balloons exploding, people crying, laughing, whatever, I'll pop it into slow motion and just do some crazy camera moves because I know that A, it's gonna stabilize it, so having like a nice moving smooth shot, it's gonna make it look more cinematic. Any sort of motion where someone like even moves their hand looks cooler. And again, it's enhancing a moment. It's making it feel cooler because it's stretching it out to making it longer, and it's capturing detail that people aren't necessarily perceiving. So it's a really good back pocket thing to have in your back pocket to make things more epic. But I highly, highly, highly recommend experimenting with 24 frames, normal frame rates, regular speed before applying this in. So if I have it in a timeline, if I'm editing the footage together and I go slow-mo, 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 24 frames per second, slow-mo, 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 it's just not gonna feel good. It's gonna be like, wow, whoa, okay, yeah. It's just, it gets drawn out. It loses its enhancement. It's like being in a room filled with 100 different Santa Clauses. You're gonna be like, okay, there's a lot of Santa here. But if there's one Santa Claus or two Santa Clauses, you're like, yes! But just be conscious, be aware with what you're filming at what time. If you guys like what I'm talking about here and like the tips and tutorials that I brought up within this, you can check out the blog post attached to this video where I sort of break down a few things about what I said in this. Maybe you didn't have your pen and paper and write it all down. You can reread the blog post, and along with that, you can check out a lot of other blog posts that are on the PremiumBeat website. There's some really great content on there from some super incredible creators. If you like what I'm talking about, like the shots that were in this, you guys can check me out at Zach Ramlin on Instagram. But that's it. I'm gonna go now edit, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.